Lieutenant Sarah Martinez had dreamed of becoming a Navy SEAL since she was 12 years old. Growing up in a military family in San Diego, she watched her father return from deployment after deployment, his stories of brotherhood and service filling her young mind with purpose. While other girls her age were focused on typical teenage concerns, Sarah spent her afternoons at the local gym, pushing her body to its limits, preparing for a future that seemed impossible to most people around her. The military had only recently opened combat roles to women, and the elite SEAL program remained largely untested territory for female candidates. Sarah knew the odds were stacked against her, but she had never been one to back down from a challenge. Her high school teachers remember her as the girl who would stay after class to ask more questions, who pushed herself to excel in physics and mathematics, subjects that would later prove crucial in her military career. When Sarah entered the Naval Academy at 18, she immediately stood out among her peers. Her instructors noticed her exceptional physical conditioning, but more importantly, they recognized her mental toughness. During survival training exercises while other cadets struggled with the harsh conditions, Sarah seemed to thrive. She had an uncanny ability to remain calm under pressure, to think clearly when others panicked, and to find solutions where others saw only problems. Her roommate, Jessica Chen, later recalled how Sarah would spend hours studying military strategy and tactics, often staying up late into the night reading about special operations missions from around the world. Sarah wasn't just preparing for a career in the Navy, she was preparing to break barriers that had never been broken before. She understood that as potentially the first woman to attempt SEAL training, she would be under intense scrutiny from day one. The physical demands of her preparation were extraordinary. Sarah's daily routine began at 4:30 a.m. with a 5-mile run, followed by hours of strength training, swimming, and combat conditioning. She worked with nutritionists to optimize her diet, with sports psychologists to strengthen her mental resilience, and with former special operations soldiers who helped her understand what she would face in the real world of elite military units. But it wasn't just about physical preparation. Sarah spent countless hours learning about the history of special operations, studying the psychology of warfare, and developing the kind of strategic thinking that would be essential in complex military situations. She learned multiple languages, studied different cultures, and developed expertise in areas ranging from explosives to emergency medicine. Her professors were amazed by her dedication and her ability to excel in subjects that challenged even the most capable students. As graduation approached, Sarah faced a decision that would change her life forever. The Navy SEAL program had announced it would accept female candidates for the first time in its history. Sarah knew this was her moment, her chance to prove that gender was not a barrier to excellence in special operations. But she also knew that failure would not just be personal. It would potentially close doors for other women who might follow in her footsteps. The announcement of her application sent shockwaves through the military community. Some officers supported her ambition, recognizing her exceptional qualifications and believing that the military needed to evolve with the times. Others were skeptical, concerned about whether women could handle the extreme physical and mental demands of SEAL training, and worried about how the introduction of women might affect unit cohesion and effectiveness. Sarah's family had mixed reactions to her decision. Her father, a career Navy officer, was proud of her courage but worried about the challenges she would face. Her mother, who had sacrificed her own career to support the family during multiple deployments, understood better than anyone the personal costs of military service. Her younger brother looked up to her with admiration, seeing her as a hero who was willing to fight for what she believed in. As Sarah prepared to leave for basic underwater demolition DART SEAL training, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. She thought about all the people who had doubted her, all the obstacles she had overcome, and all the dreams she was about to pursue. She knew that the next few months would test her in ways she had never been tested before. But she was ready for the challenge. The night before she left for training, Sarah sat alone in her room, writing in the journal she had kept since high school. She wrote about her fears, her hopes, and her determination to succeed not just for herself, but for all the women who would come after her. She understood that she was about to become part of history, and she was determined to make it a story worth telling. The first day of basic underwater demolition or SEAL training arrived with the brutal California dawn that would become Sarah's daily companion for the next 6 months. As she stepped off the bus at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, She could feel the weight of history on her shoulders. She was not just another candidate reporting for training. She was the first woman to attempt what many considered the most challenging military training program in the world. Her fellow candidates came from diverse backgrounds: former college athletes, experienced sailors, Marines seeking a new challenge, and young men fresh from basic training who thought they had what it took to join the elite. When Sarah walked into the initial briefing room, conversation stopped. Some faces showed curiosity, others skepticism, and a few displayed barely concealed hostility. She had expected this reaction and had prepared herself mentally for the isolation she might face. The training instructors, weathered veterans with decades of experience, made no special accommodations for Sarah's presence. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, the lead instructor, made it clear from the first moment that everyone would be held to the same standards. There would be no easier version of training, no modified requirements, and no excuses. Sarah appreciated this approach. She had never wanted special treatment, only the opportunity to prove herself on equal terms. The physical challenges began immediately and were more intense than anything Sarah had experienced in her years of preparation. The daily runs covered increasingly long distances in soft sand that made every step a struggle. The swimming requirements pushed candidates to their absolute limits in cold Pacific waters that seemed determined to break their will. The obstacle course demanded not just strength and agility, but the kind of mental toughness that could push through pain and exhaustion when the body wanted to quit. But it was during the water training that Sarah truly began to distinguish herself. Her years of preparation had included countless hours in swimming pools and open water, developing not just strength and endurance, but the kind of water confidence that could mean the difference between life and death in real-world operations. While other candidates struggled with underwater navigation and combat swimming techniques, Sarah moved through the water with a grace and efficiency that impressed even the most skeptical instructors. The infamous Hell Week arrived in the 5th week of training, and Sarah knew this would be the ultimate test of her resolve. For 5.5 days, candidates would be pushed to their physical and mental breaking points with virtually no sleep, constant physical challenges, and psychological pressure designed to eliminate anyone who lacked the absolute determination required for special operations work. Many of her fellow candidates had already dropped out of the program, unable to handle the relentless demands of SEAL training. As Hell Week progressed, Sarah found herself drawing on reserves of strength she didn't know she possessed. When her body screamed for rest, she forced herself to continue. When other candidates began to quit around her, she remained focused on her own performance and her own goals. The instructors watched her carefully, looking for any sign of weakness, any indication that she might not have what it took to continue. During one particularly challenging exercise involving boat carries in freezing surf, Sarah's team began to fall apart. Exhausted candidates were making mistakes, coordination was breaking down, and the instructors were applying increasing pressure. Sarah stepped up naturally into a leadership role, organizing her teammates, maintaining morale, and ensuring that everyone worked together to complete the task. Her actions didn't go unnoticed by the training staff, who made careful notes about her performance under extreme stress. The underwater knot-tying exercise became legendary among her training class. Candidates were required to tie specific knots underwater while holding their breath, a skill that could be crucial in real-world diving operations. Sarah not only completed the required knots faster than most of her male counterparts, but she did so with a precision and consistency that impressed the diving instructors. Her performance demonstrated not just physical capability, but the kind of attention to detail that could save lives in actual combat situations. As Hell Week drew to a close, Sarah looked around at the handful of candidates who remained from the original class. Many strong, capable men had quit during the previous 5 days, unable to handle the relentless pressure and physical demands. But Sarah was still there, still pushing forward, still determined to prove that she belonged among the elite. The respect she had earned from her fellow candidates was evident in their interactions. They no longer saw her as an outsider or an experiment, but as a teammate who had proven herself under the most challenging conditions imaginable. The final exercise of Hell Week involved a long ocean swim in rough conditions, followed by a beach run that would test whatever reserves of energy the candidates had left. As Sarah emerged from the cold Pacific waters and began the final run, she reflected on how far she had come since that first day of training. She had not just survived Hell Week, She had excelled in ways that surprised even her instructors. But she also knew that this was just the beginning of an even longer and more challenging journey toward becoming a Navy SEAL. Sarah's graduation from SEAL training was a historic moment that attracted attention from military leaders, journalists, and women's rights advocates around the world. She had not only completed one of the most challenging training programs in the military, but she had done so while maintaining the respect of her instructors and fellow candidates. Her final scores ranked her in the top 10% of her training class, a remarkable achievement that silenced many of her early critics. The media attention was overwhelming and largely unwelcome. Sarah had never sought publicity. She simply wanted to serve her country in the most effective way possible. Interview requests poured in from major news networks, magazines wanted to feature her on their covers, and book publishers offered lucrative contracts for her story. Sarah politely declined most of these opportunities, preferring to focus on the next phase of her career, assignment to an operational SEAL team. Her first assignment came with SEAL Team 7, based in California, and known for their expertise in maritime operations and foreign internal defense missions. The team commander, Lieutenant Commander James Harrison, was a 20-year veteran who had served multiple combat deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan. He had initially been skeptical about integrating a woman into his team, but Sarah's training scores and the reports from her instructors had impressed him enough to give her a fair chance. The other members of SEAL Team 7 represented some of the most experienced and capable special operations soldiers in the military. Petty Officer First Class Marcus Thompson, a master breacher with expertise in explosives, had completed over 50 combat missions. Senior Chief Petty Officer David Kim brought years of experience in intelligence gathering and reconnaissance. Each team member had proven themselves in actual combat situations, and they were naturally curious about how Sarah would perform when the stakes were real. Sarah's first months with the team focused on advanced training and team integration exercises. She learned the specific tactics, techniques, and procedures that SEAL Team 7 had developed over years of operational experience. The training covered everything from advanced marksmanship and close-quarters combat to foreign languages and cultural sensitivity. Sarah excelled in the intellectual aspects of the training, demonstrating a particular aptitude for languages and strategic thinking that impressed her teammates. The team's first major exercise with Sarah involved a simulated hostage rescue mission in an urban environment. The scenario required precise coordination between multiple team elements, advanced technical skills, and the ability to make split-second decisions under extreme pressure. Sarah was assigned a crucial role in the operation, infiltrating the target building through a ventilation system that was too small for most of her male teammates to navigate effectively. As the exercise began, Sarah found herself crawling through narrow ventilation shafts in complete darkness, relying on her memory of the building's layout and her ability to move silently through confined spaces. Her smaller physical size, which some had viewed as a potential disadvantage in SEAL operations, proved to be a significant tactical advantage in this scenario. She successfully reached her position inside the building and provided critical intelligence to her teammates about enemy positions and hostage locations. When the simulated assault began, Sarah's performance was flawless. She neutralized her assigned targets with precision, maintained perfect communication with her team members, and helped coordinate the successful rescue of all simulated hostages. Her teammates were impressed not just by her technical skills, but by her calm demeanor under pressure and her ability to adapt quickly to changing circumstances during the operation. Following the successful exercise, Sarah began to feel truly accepted by her team. The initial skepticism and curiosity gave way to genuine respect and camaraderie. Her teammates started including her in their informal conversations, seeking her input on tactical planning, and treating her as a full member of the team rather than an experiment or curiosity. She had proven that she could perform at the highest levels when it mattered most. However, just as Sarah was beginning to feel established in her role, news came that would change everything. Military leadership had decided to conduct a comprehensive review of the integration of women into special operations forces. The review would examine everything from physical performance standards to unit cohesion and operational effectiveness. While the review was being conducted, all women in special operations roles would be temporarily reassigned to administrative positions. The news hit Sarah like a physical blow. She had worked for years to reach this point, had proven herself in training and exercises, and had earned the respect of some of the most elite soldiers in the military. Now, through no fault of her own performance, she was being pulled away from operational duties and assigned to a desk job at the Pentagon. The official explanation was that the review was necessary to ensure that the integration process was proceeding safely and effectively. Sarah's teammates were outraged on her behalf. They had seen her performance firsthand and knew that her removal had nothing to do with her capabilities or her contribution to the team. Several of them wrote letters to their commanding officers supporting Sarah's continued assignment to the team. Lieutenant Commander Harrison formally protested the decision, arguing that Sarah was one of his most capable operators and that her removal would actually reduce his team's effectiveness. But the decision had been made at levels far above the team commander's authority. Sarah was given 2 weeks to transition her responsibilities and report to her new assignment in Washington, D.C. As she packed her gear and prepared to leave the team that had become like family to her, Sarah wondered if she would ever get the chance to return to operational duties. She had proven that she could succeed as a Navy SEAL, but the bureaucracy and politics of military leadership seemed determined to prevent her from actually serving in that role. The Pentagon assignment felt like exile to Sarah. After years of intense physical training and the camaraderie of operational teams, she found herself trapped behind a desk in a sterile office building, reviewing policy documents and attending endless meetings about military personnel regulations. Her official title was Special Operations Integration Analyst, but she knew that her real job was to sit quietly while senior officers debated her future and the future of women in special operations. The days blended together in a monotonous routine of paperwork, briefings, and bureaucratic processes that seemed designed to crush the spirit of anyone who had experienced the excitement and purpose of actual military operations. Sarah watched through her office window as other military personnel hurried past, going about missions and assignments that actually mattered, while she remained stuck in administrative limbo. Her former teammates from SEAL Team 7 stayed in touch through phone calls and emails, sharing stories from their training exercises and deployments. Each conversation was a painful reminder of the life Sarah had been forced to leave behind. Marcus Thompson called regularly to update her on the team's activities and to express his frustration with the situation. "This is complete nonsense," he told her during one particularly difficult conversation. "You earned your place on this team and everyone knows it." The military review process dragged on for months, with no clear timeline for completion and no indication of what the final recommendations might be. Sarah found herself caught in a bureaucratic maze where her fate was being decided by officers who had never served with her, never seen her performance under pressure, and never witnessed the respect she had earned from her teammates. The review committee requested extensive documentation about her training scores, her psychological evaluations, and her integration with operational units. During this time, Sarah struggled to maintain her physical fitness and operational readiness. The Pentagon had a basic fitness facility, but it was nothing like the advanced training environments she had grown accustomed to. She woke up at 4:30 a.m. every morning, just as she had during her operational assignment, but instead of preparing for challenging missions with her team, she found herself running alone on treadmills and lifting weights in a nearly empty gym. The psychological toll of the situation was perhaps even more challenging than the physical aspects. Sarah had built her entire identity around being a Navy SEAL, and now she found herself questioning whether that identity had any meaning if she wasn't allowed to actually perform the job she had trained for. She began seeing a military psychologist, not because she was required to, but because she needed help processing the frustration and disappointment that threatened to consume her. 6 months into her Pentagon assignment, Sarah received unexpected news. She was being considered for a new position in the military's Special Operations Command, working on strategic planning and intelligence analysis. The job would utilize her expertise and training, but it would still be a staff position rather than an operational role. Some of her colleagues encouraged her to accept the opportunity, arguing that it could lead to more significant responsibilities in the future. However, Sarah was torn between accepting what might be her only path forward and holding out hope that she might eventually return to operational duties. She spent long evenings walking around Washington, D.C., thinking about her options and trying to decide what would be best for her career and her personal well-being. The city's monuments and memorials reminded her of the sacrifices that previous generations of military personnel had made, and she drew inspiration from their examples of perseverance in the face of adversity. Meanwhile, her former unit was deployed to Southeast Asia for a classified mission involving maritime security operations. Sarah followed the news reports about increased naval activity in the region and knew that her teammates were probably involved in operations that she should have been part of. The knowledge that her skills and training were being wasted while her team faced real-world challenges was almost unbearable. The review committee finally published their initial findings after nearly a year of investigation. Their report acknowledged that Sarah had performed exceptionally well during training and had successfully integrated with her operational team. However, they recommended continued study of the long-term effects of integrating women into special operations units. The report essentially concluded that while Sarah's individual performance had been excellent, more time and data were needed to make broader policy recommendations. Sarah read the report with a mixture of vindication and frustration. She had been proven right about her capabilities, but the bureaucracy seemed determined to keep her in administrative roles indefinitely. The report's recommendations meant that she could expect to spend at least another year in staff positions while the military continued to study a question that she felt had already been answered by her performance. As she sat in her Pentagon office, looking at the report that had taken a year to produce and seemed designed to justify maintaining the status quo, Sarah made a difficult decision. She would not accept the Special Operations Command position. Instead, she would request a transfer to a different part of the military where her skills could be fully utilized. If the Navy wasn't ready to employ her as a SEAL, perhaps she could find meaning and purpose in a different role. But even as she drafted the transfer request, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was giving up on a dream that had defined her entire adult life. She had proven that women could succeed in special operations, but the system seemed determined to prevent her from actually serving in that capacity. The irony was not lost on her. She had overcome every challenge that the military had placed in front of her, except for the challenge of military bureaucracy itself. Sarah's transfer request was approved faster than she had expected, and within 6 weeks she found herself assigned to the Naval Intelligence Command in Norfolk, Virginia. Her new role involved analyzing maritime security threats and developing intelligence assessments for fleet commanders. While it wasn't the operational assignment she had dreamed of, the work was challenging and important, and Sarah threw herself into it with the same dedication she had shown throughout her military career. Her new colleagues at Naval Intelligence were impressed by her background and expertise. Few intelligence analysts had the kind of operational training and tactical knowledge that Sarah brought to the job. She found that her SEAL training gave her unique insights into how intelligence products would be used by operational units, and she was able to produce analysis that was both detailed and practical for commanders in the field. The years passed quietly for Sarah as she built a reputation as one of the Navy's most capable intelligence analysts. She was promoted twice, earned several commendations for her work, and developed expertise in emerging maritime security challenges in the Pacific region. Her analysis of Chinese naval activities was particularly well regarded by senior military leaders, and she became a go-to expert for briefings on Asian maritime security issues. However, Sarah never completely gave up hope of returning to operational duties. She maintained her physical fitness at levels far above what was required for intelligence work, continued to practice tactical skills during her personal time, and stayed in touch with developments in special operations forces. She knew that someday there might be an opportunity to return to the role she had trained for, and she wanted to be ready if that moment came. Her former teammates from SEAL Team 7 had scattered to different assignments over the years, but they maintained contact through social media and occasional reunions. Marcus Thompson had been promoted to Chief Petty Officer and was serving as an instructor at the SEAL training facility. David Kim had transitioned to the civilian sector and was working as a defense contractor. Lieutenant Commander Harrison had been promoted to full commander and was leading a larger special operations unit. During one of these informal reunions, Commander Harrison mentioned that he had been selected to lead a new joint task force focused on maritime security operations in the Indo-Pacific region. The mission would involve coordination between different military services and close cooperation with allied nations throughout the region. It was exactly the kind of challenging, important assignment that Sarah had always hoped to be part of. "I wish I had someone with your expertise on my team," Harrison told Sarah during their conversation. "The intelligence picture in that region is incredibly complex, and having someone who understands both the operational and analytical sides would be invaluable." Sarah appreciated the sentiment, but she had grown accustomed to the reality that her operational days were behind her. 3 years into her intelligence assignment, Sarah was approached by her commanding officer with an unusual opportunity. The Defense Intelligence Agency was looking for experienced analysts to serve temporary assignments with operational units, providing real-time intelligence support during actual missions. The program was designed to bridge the gap between intelligence analysts and operational personnel, ensuring that intelligence products were relevant and useful in actual combat situations. Sarah was intrigued by the opportunity, even though it would only be a temporary assignment and wouldn't involve her returning to full operational status. She would be embedded with different units for periods of several months, providing intelligence support during exercises and actual missions. It wasn't the same as being a fully operational SEAL, but it would allow her to return to the world of operational military units and to use all of her skills in training. Her first assignment under this program was with a Marine Special Operations Unit conducting training exercises in the Philippines. Sarah found herself back in the field for the first time in years, working closely with operational personnel and providing intelligence support during complex tactical scenarios. The Marines were initially skeptical about working with a Navy intelligence analyst, but her operational background and practical knowledge quickly won their respect. During one particularly challenging exercise, Sarah's analysis of enemy positions and movement patterns proved crucial to the success of the mission. Her ability to interpret intelligence data, while understanding the tactical requirements of the operational unit, allowed her to provide insights that traditional intelligence analysts might have missed. The exercise commander specifically commended her contribution in his final report. The temporary assignment program proved to be exactly what Sarah needed to reignite her sense of purpose and professional satisfaction. Over the following 2 years, she worked with different special operations units throughout the Pacific region, building a reputation as an exceptional intelligence officer who could bridge the gap between analysis and operations. Her unique background made her valuable to commanders who needed intelligence support that truly understood the operational environment. However, Sarah still felt that something was missing from her career. She had found meaningful work and professional satisfaction, but she hadn't forgotten the dreams and goals that had originally motivated her to join the military. She continued to watch from the sidelines as other personnel received the operational assignments she had always wanted, and she wondered if she would ever get another chance to serve in the role she had trained for. The answer to that question would come from an unexpected source and at a time when Sarah had almost given up hope of returning to full operational status. Commander Harrison, now leading his Joint Task Force, was facing a crisis that would require exactly the combination of skills and experience that Sarah had developed over her years in intelligence work and her original training as a Navy SEAL. The secure phone call came to Sarah's Norfolk office on a Tuesday morning in March, interrupting her routine analysis of shipping patterns in the South China Sea. The voice on the other end belonged to Commander Harrison, but his usual calm demeanor was replaced by unmistakable urgency. "Sarah, I need you to catch the next flight to Pearl Harbor," Harrison said without preamble. "We have a situation developing that requires your specific skill set. I can't discuss details over this line, but I'm sending a car to pick you up within the hour. Pack for an extended deployment." Within 6 hours, Sarah found herself on a military transport aircraft headed across the Pacific Ocean, her mind racing with possibilities about what kind of crisis might require her particular combination of intelligence expertise and operational training. She hadn't received deployment orders in years, and the sudden urgency suggested something significant was developing in the region. Upon arriving at Pearl Harbor, Sarah was immediately transported to a secure briefing facility where Commander Harrison and his Joint Task Force staff were assembled. The atmosphere in the room was tense, and Sarah could see the strain on Harrison's face as he began the classified briefing. 3 days ago, a Chinese research vessel violated territorial waters near a classified U.S. military installation in the Pacific, Harrison began, displaying satellite imagery on the main screen. Intelligence indicates this wasn't a navigation error. The vessel contains sophisticated surveillance equipment and has been collecting intelligence on our maritime operations in the region. Sarah studied the imagery, noting the vessel's position relative to shipping lanes and military facilities. Her years of intelligence analysis immediately told her this was a significant escalation in regional tensions, but she still didn't understand why her presence was required. Harrison continued, "The situation became critical yesterday when the research vessel suffered what appears to be a legitimate mechanical failure. They're dead in the water, approximately 12 nautical miles from our installation. The Chinese government has requested assistance, but they've refused offers from our surface vessels, claiming they only need technical expertise to restart their engines." The implications began to become clear to Sarah. A disabled Chinese vessel near a classified U.S. facility created an extremely delicate diplomatic and military situation. The Chinese crew was potentially collecting intelligence even while disabled. But any aggressive action by the U.S. military could escalate into a major international incident. "Here's where it gets complicated," Harrison said, advancing to the next slide. "Our intelligence indicates that there are actually 2 Americans aboard that vessel, civilian maritime engineers who were consulting on the ship's propulsion systems. The Chinese haven't acknowledged their presence, and we can't officially admit we know about it without revealing our intelligence sources." Sarah's mind immediately began processing the tactical challenges. A covert rescue operation would require infiltrating a foreign vessel in heavily monitored waters without being detected by either Chinese personnel or international observers. It would need to be conducted by someone who could blend in, who understood both the technical and tactical aspects of the situation, and who could operate independently if the mission went wrong. The Americans aboard are Dr. Rebecca Chen, a naval architecture professor from MIT, and Lieutenant Commander retired David Park, a former Navy engineer now working as a civilian contractor, Harrison explained. They were consultants hired through a third-party company, probably without realizing they were working indirectly for Chinese intelligence. Sarah began to understand why she had been called in. Her intelligence background would allow her to understand the broader implications of the situation. Her operational training would enable her to conduct a covert infiltration and rescue, and her technical knowledge would help her blend in as a maritime engineer if she needed cover for her mission. Harrison confirmed her suspicions. "We need someone who can approach that vessel as a technical consultant, assess the situation with our people aboard, and extract them without creating an international incident. Traditional SEAL teams are too conspicuous for this mission, and intelligence personnel don't have the operational skills needed for potential combat situations." The mission parameters were unlike anything Sarah had encountered during her years of training and intelligence work. She would need to approach the Chinese vessel in civilian clothing, pose as an independent maritime engineer responding to their distress call, locate and assess the condition of the 2 Americans, and then find a way to extract them without revealing the covert nature of the operation. "The Chinese crew believes their engine problems are legitimate," Harrison continued, "but our intelligence suggests they're being used as cover for the intelligence collection mission. The technical crew may not even know about the surveillance equipment aboard their vessel. This gives us an opportunity to approach them as helpful neighbors rather than adversaries." Sarah spent the next several hours reviewing detailed intelligence files on the vessel, its crew, and the 2 Americans aboard. Dr. Chen was a respected academic who had published extensively on marine propulsion systems and had no known connections to intelligence activities. Lieutenant Commander Park had left the Navy 5 years earlier and had been working as a civilian consultant on various maritime engineering projects. The more Sarah learned about the situation, the more she realized how perfectly suited she was for this particular mission. Her intelligence background gave her insights into the broader strategic implications. Her operational training provided the skills needed for covert infiltration, and her technical knowledge would allow her to credibly pose as a maritime engineering consultant. As the briefing concluded, Harrison looked directly at Sarah. "I know this isn't the kind of mission you trained for originally, and I know you've been out of operational assignments for years, but you're the only person I know with the right combination of skills and experience for this job. The question is, are you ready to go back into the field?" Sarah looked around the room at the assembled task force personnel, feeling the familiar surge of adrenaline that had been absent from her life for too long. After 5 years of administrative assignments and intelligence analysis, She was finally being asked to use all of her skills and training for a mission that could have significant strategic implications. "When do I leave?" she asked. The mission launched at dawn the following morning with Sarah aboard a civilian maritime assistance vessel that would provide perfect cover for approaching the disabled Chinese research ship. She wore civilian clothes and carried identification establishing her as Sarah Martinez, an independent marine engineering consultant based in Hawaii. Her cover story was solid. She had responded to an international maritime distress call and was offering technical assistance to help restart the vessel's engines. As they approached the Chinese ship, Sarah could see the vessel's crew watching their approach through binoculars. The research ship appeared genuinely disabled, sitting low in the water with no visible signs of engine operation. However, Sarah's trained eye noticed several antenna arrays and sensor packages that seemed far more sophisticated than what a normal research vessel would require. The Chinese captain, a weathered man in his 50s named Liu, greeted Sarah with cautious politeness when she boarded his vessel. He spoke reasonable English and seemed genuinely grateful for the assistance, though Sarah detected an underlying tension that suggested he was under pressure to resolve the situation quickly. She began her cover mission by conducting a legitimate assessment of their engine problems. What Sarah discovered in the engine room confirmed that the mechanical failure was real, not staged for intelligence collection purposes. A critical component in the vessel's main propulsion system had failed, leaving them genuinely stranded. However, as she worked to diagnose the problem, she also confirmed the presence of surveillance equipment throughout the ship that had nothing to do with legitimate marine research. Her first contact with the two Americans came when she was invited to join the crew for lunch in the ship's galley. Dr. Rebecca Chen and Lieutenant Commander David Park were introduced as technical consultants helping with the vessel's research mission. Both Americans appeared uncomfortable and seemed relieved to encounter another English speaker aboard the Chinese ship. During casual conversation over lunch, Sarah was able to communicate her true identity to Dr. Chen through subtle references that only someone with military intelligence background would recognize. Chen's eyes widened slightly when she realized that Sarah was not just a random Good Samaritan, but she maintained her composure and continued the conversation naturally. Later that afternoon, while working on the engine repairs, Sarah had an opportunity to speak privately with both Americans. Dr. Chen confirmed that they had been hired through a consulting firm to provide technical expertise on marine propulsion systems, but had gradually realized that their real purpose was to help the Chinese develop more sophisticated surveillance vessels. "We've been trying to figure out how to get off this ship without creating an international incident," Lieutenant Commander Park whispered to Sarah while they examined engine components. "We suspect our phones are being monitored, and we don't think the Chinese crew will let us leave voluntarily." Sarah assured them that extraction plans were in place, but she needed to complete the engine repairs first to maintain her cover and avoid arousing suspicion. Working with genuine focus and expertise, she identified the specific component that needed replacement and informed Captain Liu that she would need to return to her vessel to retrieve the necessary parts. This gave Sarah the opportunity she needed to communicate with Commander Harrison's task force and finalize the extraction plan. The Chinese crew had grown comfortable with her presence and trusted her technical expertise, which would be crucial for the next phase of the operation. She arranged for a night extraction that would take advantage of poor weather conditions predicted for that evening. As darkness fell and a Pacific storm began to develop, Sarah returned to the Chinese vessel with the replacement engine parts and a small team of technical assistants, who were actually special operations personnel in civilian clothes. The rough seas and limited visibility provided perfect cover for the more complex aspects of the operation. While Sarah and her team worked on completing the engine repairs, they also implemented a sophisticated plan to extract the two Americans without the Chinese crew. Realizing what was happening, Dr. Chen and Lieutenant Commander Park were quietly moved to a section of the ship near the extraction point, while Sarah's team created a diversion by staging a minor emergency in the engine room that required immediate attention from the Chinese crew. The extraction itself was executed flawlessly, with both Americans transferred to Sarah's vessel during what appeared to be a routine exchange of technical equipment. The Chinese crew remained focused on the engine repairs and the weather-related challenges of maintaining their position in increasingly rough seas. By dawn, Sarah had successfully completed both missions. The engine repairs were finished and the Chinese vessel was fully operational, while the two Americans were safely aboard the U.S. Navy vessel and heading toward American territorial waters. Captain Liu expressed genuine gratitude for Sarah's assistance and had no idea that his technical consultant had actually been a Navy SEAL conducting a covert rescue operation. The mission's success exceeded all expectations and had significant strategic implications. The intelligence gathered during Sarah's time aboard the Chinese vessel provided valuable insights into their surveillance capabilities and intentions in the region. The safe extraction of the two Americans prevented a potential diplomatic crisis while protecting valuable personnel who had inadvertently become involved in intelligence collection activities. Commander Harrison's after-action report specifically praised Sarah's unique contribution to the mission's success. Her combination of intelligence expertise, operational skills, and technical knowledge had made possible an operation that could not have been conducted by traditional military units. The mission demonstrated the value of personnel who could bridge different military specialties and operate effectively in complex, ambiguous situations. Following the mission's completion, Sarah received a personal commendation from the Secretary of the Navy and was offered a permanent assignment to Commander Harrison's Joint Task Force. More importantly, she was offered the opportunity to return to full operational status as a Navy SEAL, with the understanding that her intelligence background made her particularly valuable for complex missions requiring both analytical and operational capabilities. As Sarah stood on the deck of the Navy vessel, watching the sun rise over the Pacific Ocean, she reflected on the long journey that had brought her to this moment. 5 years earlier, she had been forced out of operational assignments by bureaucratic reviews and administrative policies. Now she was being welcomed back not despite her unique background, but because of it. The mission had proven that her years in intelligence work hadn't been a detour from her military career, but rather preparation for a role that nobody had imagined when she first completed SEAL training. She had become something new, a hybrid operator who could function effectively in both the intelligence and special operations communities. Sarah accepted the permanent assignment to the Joint Task Force, knowing that she would finally be able to use all of her skills and training in service of her country. Her pioneering journey as the first female Navy SEAL had faced unexpected challenges and setbacks, but it had ultimately led her to a role where she could make contributions that no one else could make. Years later, when young women asked her about breaking barriers in military service, Sarah would tell them that the path forward was rarely straight or predictable. Sometimes the greatest opportunities came from the most difficult setbacks, and sometimes the skills that seemed irrelevant at the time turned out to be exactly what was needed for future challenges. Her story had become proof that persistence, adaptability, and excellence could overcome any obstacle, even when the path forward seemed impossible to find.